So, hello and welcome to the before the first episode of A Sort of Young Person's Guide to Prog Rock. I will be your host, Ian Prize, and I'm joined by one of my various co-hosts, Ryan Robison.
Hello, Ian.
Hello, Ryan. So, today we're going to give you just a little taster of what's to come with Season 1. So, as I hope you know from the trailer, this will be a deep dive into prog rock, one album at a time, via my 40 or so favorite albums. So to take it all the way back, my love of prog was really forged in the furnace with our mutual good friend Brian, who you'll probably be hearing in a few episodes' time. And then, of course, you, Ryan Robison. So welcome. So officially, welcome to the podcast. Talk to me about what we're about to do today.
Well, we're going to tantalize our audience and let them know what they're in for the next 3 seasons of Prog Delights. It should be quite the journey. I have to imagine this was fun to think about back when this pod was just a twinkle in your eye.
It was, and I was going to say, this is going down memory lane in many ways, so I'm going to be rediscovering all of my favorite albums, and hopefully sharing some of my favorite albums with you. So we're going to start where the bands themselves started, with the Beatles leaving their pop life behind them and getting interesting in both soundscapes and lyrical content. So the first 2 episodes will be the Beatles album Revolver and the Beatles album Sgt. Pepper's, which is respectively the Beatles giving up their live touring and their kind of Love Me Do songs and moving towards a very, very crazy recorded soundscape. And then, of course, Sgt. Pepper's is the psychedelic album.
Well, I think this is a great place to start because I think most people hear the word psychedelia. They think of those, well, I'm just dating myself here, but those late night music compilations where it's something for just 3 easy payments in 1995. You can have 3 CDs, and we're going to talk about bands like Strawberry Alarm Clock and that kind of nonsense. But this is where psychedelia, for me, believe it or not, kids, this music is not just about drugs. It's you will truly expand your mind if you think about it in a different way. And I think these 2 albums in particular are a great place to start.
And I think, again, because the Beatles at this point are at the height of their career, they have the most technically advanced producer in the form of George Martin and studio in the form of Abbey Road. And they are themselves masters of writing and recording music. So I feel like this is amazing musicians and technicians and all that sort of thing coming together to make amazing music, which, as you say, expands the mind, but more seriously, expands the kind of sonic and lyrical color palette. This isn't the raw psychedelia of like the Doors and stuff and Strawberry Alarm Clock.
I had to bring that up. Still thinking about those infomercials.
So the next band that bloomed in this kind of British psychedelia blossoming was the Moody Blues with their second album, but first real album, Days of Future Past. So this is the first, quote-unquote, concept album of the prog rock world. It is an accidental orchestral classic where a British beat band just happened to get together with an orchestra, and we'll get into that story. But they create a concept album about a day in the life. So starting in the morning, ending in the evening.
This is something, come into it with a little bit more patience. The reason I say that, little delightful anecdote from my father, who was old enough to be around when the Moody Blues were, in their heyday. He took a date to see them at one point, and it's not the smoothest move on a date to fall asleep during the concert, but God bless him, he did. Okay. And the music is not boring at all, but this is something to be listened to in the pleasure of your own home on your hi-fi with some patience, and you will discover what's really in it for you.
Yeah, I think this is one of the easier listens we'll be going into. And, again, I think it's where psychedelia was at this time, where it was a kind of British beat rock tradition that was then starting to add interesting, sonic colors to the whole thing.
Well, and I think that's where people got tripped up, because if you were expecting that kind of music from a beat band, and then you're like, oh, I know these guys, what are they going to do next? And then they throw this at you, you're going to be like, what is going on?
It's an orchestral suite.
Yeah. But they do this much, much better than our beloved Floyd trying to bring an orchestra in. But that's for another episode.
That's a completely different episode. But speaking of our beloved Floyd, we meet Pink Floyd in their one-off Piper at the Gates of Dawn. So I say one-off because I hope most of you know the story of Pink Floyd, but they had a frontman in 1967 called Syd Barrett, and we'll get into the story of his frankly quite tragic musical end, but he and the Floyd left us Piper at the Gates of Dawn, 1967, and this is a prime example for me of kind of the Beatlemania, where they recorded this right next to the Beatles, in fact, in Abbey Road, but it is British to the hilt, and it is way, way, way more psychedelic than many, many, many things. It is a very unusual sonic landscape.
And when everyone thinks of Floyd, right, they will never do this again. This truly is a one-off, like you're saying. They will never make music like this ever again.
Yeah, so this is a very, very special, special album, but this introduces Pink Floyd, the name, if not Pink Floyd, the band.
Yeah.
And we'll get into where the band actually goes later, but, you know, you have to introduce one of the heavy hitters at their very, very beginning.
Well, it's a funny one, too, because I don't know anyone whose first Pink Floyd album is this, and I would still maybe recommend that it not be number one. But, boy, after you've done your tour of duty there, then think about it. This is the same people.
Come back and see what was cooking back in 1967. So we leave the Garden of Eden of psychedelia and move on to the first actual bloom of prog. And this is the point in which we meet all of our heavy hitters. So we start with probably the first canonical prog album, the legendary In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson. So this is really, for me, where prog gets its flavors. It's longer songs, much darker lyrics than, say, Sgt. Pepper's, and a lot more jazz noodling. And to quote a famous Supreme Court justice, I don't know what prog is, but I know it when I hear it.
Could not be truer in this case, because again, put yourself in this time period, put yourself back in 1969 and think about everything that comes before this, and then you hear this with the fun-loving Robert Fripp and company, and you will absolutely just blow your lid. Yep.
And we go from 14 songs on Revolver and I think 11 or 12 or 13 songs on Sgt. Pepper down to 5 songs on In the Court of the Crimson King, and it gives a taster of where prog's about to go.
And it's not to say it's all jazz after that either.
Oh, absolutely not, but it's mostly jazz. But King Crimson was another band that, in this form, was not long for this musical world, and they would completely collapse after this first album, leaving only legendary guitarist Robert Fripp, who we'll definitely talk about, and lyricist Peter Sinfeld. They still had a recording contract, so they had to go back into the studio and patch together In the Wake of Poseidon. So In the Wake of Poseidon carries on almost literally the same musical structures, themes, etc. from In the Court of the Crimson King. And we debate on both of these episodes which was the better of the two. But to me, they're one in the same album. They're almost just like a two-parter.
Is it a reinvention or just a mulligan? You decide.
That's the joy of this. You get to decide. So we leave King Crimson crumbling yet again after that album to travel on to another heavy hitter. So we are introduced to Yes with their third album, the Yes album. So Yes gains guitar wizard Steve Howe and just comes out swinging, absolutely swinging, with the kind of positive lyrical soundscape and ambitious instrumentals that we love them for.
Oh, and the ambition. Yes, we'll have some soaring heights, maybe the highest in prog, and also some of the most crushing lows. And you should experience all of it.
Yep. And they are two sides of the same coin. That is the nature of ambition.
They will fly very close to the sun on several occasions.
So join us for that journey as well, because that's a good story arc. So yet another band we will meet during this first outing will be Genesis. So most of you, I trust, will know of Genesis as that band Phil Collins was in. But of course, if you love prog, you know that Genesis started in the Peter Gabriel era. So, for this album, Nursery Crime, Genesis will gain Phil Collins, the drummer at this point, and Steve Hackett, the guitarist, joining, of course, Mike Rutherford and Tony Banks. And they really start perfecting their theatrical long-form songs. They're going to be singing about Victorian nursery crimes at this stage, but they'll get into Britannia, they're going to get into Greek myths, they'll get into all sorts.
And when you say theater, you mean it. This would be one of maybe the only bands on this list that I think you are completely missing part of the experience if you do not see some live performances.
Yeah.
The costumes. Mr. Gabriel, boy. Not a lot of music must be seen. This one you gotta see.
Yeah, this one must be seen. And the albums do a great job of painting word pictures as well. So we'll get into the theatrical flavorings of Genesis on Nursery Crime. And then we will move over to Jethro Tull. So flautist, singer, and songwriter Ian Anderson and his crew, his merry band, will come up with, and I use this word contentiously, a concept album, Aqualung. It will explore both kind of British characters, but also a personal relationship with God. Not entirely sure. We'll get into that very deeply when the episode comes up. But very, very uniquely, Jethro Tull comes from a blues/folk tradition. So this is prog with very, very, very little fat on the bone. There's much less jazz noodling, much less acrobatic solos, much less theatrics. These are all just clear, beautiful songs. So, welcome, Jethro Tull.
And maybe some of the only prog with some self-awareness because, and we'll get to this, they produce maybe the only album that openly makes fun of prog while they're making prog.
And we'll get into that. That's again part of their magical story arc. And then we get introduced to the prog that your mom warned you about. So this is Emerson, Lake and Palmer. So while Jethro Tull were good about keeping fat on the bone, this is almost pure lard. And I say that with love. Emerson, Lake and Palmer were prog's first supergroup, comprised of keyboardist Keith Emerson, singer Greg Lake, and drummer Carl Palmer. They would go bigger and harder than any of the other prog we'll cover. And it does get contentious, but this is prog for prog's sake, and I've always had a soft spot.
Well, they burn bright and they burn fast. And if you think they ever tone it down at any point in their career, they do not. They up the ante every single time.
Yep. They will go out in a massive red dwarf of of prog. Blue Giant. There we go. That's the good one. They go out in a giant...
There's some better astronomy.
There's better astronomy out there. They go out in a Blue Giant of prog.
They do. And again, like anything else, you've got to see it.
So, we then end the season on Caravans in the Land of Grand Pink. So, whilst all of this prog was going on in London and on various European and American tours and starting to take off, down in Canterbury, in the Garden of England, a sleepy, sleepy, sleepy corner of the world, there was a bunch of other progsters who were making a much more chilled out, jazz-obsessed, and frankly, completely jokey version of prog. They're just lazing in the sun, playing acoustic guitars, and laughing with themselves. But it is a fun subgenre of prog that was kind of going along at the same time. So we'll take a quick little tour down to the countryside when you've had your fill of being rocked extremely hard by all these prog people. So that's Caravans in the Land of Grand Pink.
A great album to put on in your literal caravan.
Nice.
For some fine British camping with no fires allowed.
So for this era, do you have any top songs that you would suggest to get a flavor? We'll start with Yes. So off of the Yes album, do you have a song that you think captures that album?
Bounce along to some Yours Is No Disgrace.
Okay.
It's so distinctly and uniquely them.
I think it's unhinged lyrics and Steve Howe just tearing up every type of guitar. It's a tour de force. And I think you get a good sense for how acrobatic their rhythm section is as well. So we'll get into all of that when we get into it, but yeah. So do you have any, what would you say for King Crimson?
21st Century Schizoid Man. I mean, yeah, that's probably the hit single, and I'm making air quotes for that album if we must.
Yep.
But if you're thinking of let's define prog right now, well, let's blast the Mellotron and let's let Fripp shred his noodly guitar in a way that also is not going to lose the audience like they sometimes do later. There's no
Yep.
improv nonsense that you've got to wade through. So start there.
And we get introduced to the heavenly vocals of one Greg Lake, which we'll come back to, don't you worry. But yeah, he's one of Prague's crown jewels in a vocal sense. So do you have any songs off of Aqualung by Jethro Tull you would like to suggest?
Yeah, I'll go with Locomotive Breath. Like this is one you will hear on your, classic rock station. It does make sense for the radio, but as far as it being a piece of a concept album and the lyrics fitting into that, it's just a nice tight little package that anyone could enjoy.
Yeah. We'll come to Emerson, Lake and Palmer off of their self-titled debut. Do you have one that you think captures them?
The Barbarian. And I know that means you
Okay.
don't get to hear Greg sing, but hear me out. This is where ELP is going to go in a wildly different direction than anything else we've talked about so far, because they're not going to do jazz. They're not going to do any psychedelia. They're going to do some class, in this case, a cover.
Yeah.
I think it's the thing to hear.
It is. And I guess I will then chuck in Musical Box off of Nursery Crime from Genesis. It's a 10-minute long story song. Peter Gabriel is giving it his all in a theatrical sense. And it has some unbelievable drum work and guitar work from New Kids on the Block, Phil Collins and Steve Hackett. So you can hear Genesis really working as a 5-piece, the best they ever will. So that kicks that off. And then, because I have a personal love for this and I want everyone to go off and listen to the Canterbury bands, go with Winter Wine from In the Land of Grey and Pink. So frankly, every song is as good as every other song, but this is endless noodling, completely ridiculous kind of pastoral lyrics. But that's Winter Wine by Caravan. Those would be my suggestions.
Mm-mm.
That is all for our first blooming of Prague in season 1, and we will join you next week for Revolver. But for now, that's happy trails and happy listening, everyone, from your host, Ian Prize, my friend, Ryan Robison.
Thank you, Ian, and I hope you'll all join us as friends very soon.
Happy listening, everyone, and this has been a sort of young person's guide to prog rock. We will see you next episode.